The alarm hit before I even touched the mop bucket. Red light. Not the soft warning glow. The sharp one. The one that meant something on Halcyon Station had gone very wrong, very fast. My name is Daniel Wren, and I clean floors for a living, 3 decks below the nursery chambers of the most powerful being on this station. I never thought that fact would matter. Not until the day the lights turned red and every caliph on the level ran the other way. The caliph are tall, taller than any human, with long limbs, smooth gray-blue skin, and eyes that shine faintly gold in low light. They built this station. They own this station. Humans like me work here on contract, mostly doing the jobs the caliph consider beneath them, mopping, hauling waste, fixing pipes nobody wants to touch. We are tolerated. We are not trusted. So when the emergency alarm screamed through the corridor outside the royal nursery, my first instinct was to keep my head down and stay out of the way. That is what a janitor does. That is what keeps a janitor alive on a station like this. But then I heard the crying. Not the alarm, not the shouting caliph voices further down the hall. Something smaller, higher. 4 small voices, all crying at once, coming from behind a door that was never supposed to be unlocked for someone like me. I stood there with my mop still in my hand, water dripping onto the polished floor, and I made a choice that would change everything. I pushed the door open. The nursery chamber was warm, almost too warm, lit by soft amber light that pulsed from the walls like a heartbeat, and in the center of the room, in a nest of woven silver fiber, were 4 small shapes, each one no bigger than a human toddler, each one shaking, the Queen's quadruplets. I recognized them instantly, even though I had only ever seen them from a distance, through reinforced glass, when the Queen herself carried them past the maintenance halls like small treasures wrapped in light. Now there was no Queen, no nursery attendant, no guard. Just 4 frightened hatchlings and a control panel on the wall blinking with warning symbols I could not read. I should have called for help. I should have backed out of that room and pretended I had never seen it. Instead, I heard myself say, out loud, to no one, "Okay, okay, it's okay." And I stepped inside. The temperature control panel was flashing a symbol I did not recognize, but I did not need to read Calith's script to understand what was happening. The room was getting colder by the second. I could feel it on my own skin, the warm air turning thin and sharp. For a human, cold air is uncomfortable. For a Calith hatchling, built for warmth and light, it could be something far worse. One of the 4, the smallest, had gone very still. Its breathing had slowed. Its skin, which should have glowed a soft gold, had faded to a dull gray. I did not think. I just moved. I pulled off my work jacket, the thick canvas one I wore over my uniform every shift, and wrapped it around the smallest hatchling. Its body was cool to the touch, far too cool, and my chest tightened with something I had not expected to feel for a creature that was not even human. Fear. Real fear. Not for myself. For it. "Come on," I whispered, rubbing my hands gently along its small arms, the way my mother used to do for my little sister when she was born too early, and the doctors worried she would not make it through the night. "Come on, stay with me." The other 3 hatchlings crowded closer, drawn by the warmth of my body, or maybe by the sound of my voice. They pressed against my legs, my arms, wherever they could reach, their small clawed hands gripping my sleeves. Somewhere above me, hidden speakers crackled with a Caliph voice, sharp and urgent, giving instructions I could not fully follow. Emergency systems failing, backup power redirected to the medical wing, nursery on its own for the next several minutes. Several minutes, that did not sound like much. But when you are holding something small and cooling in your arms, several minutes can feel like several lifetimes. I looked around the room, searching for anything that might help. My eyes landed on a stack of thick woven blankets in the corner, the kind used to line the hatchling nest. I grabbed as many as I could carry and brought them back, wrapping each hatchling in turn, layering warmth around their small bodies, the way I would layer blankets on a cold winter night back home. It was not enough. The smallest one was still fading. I remembered something then, something so simple it almost embarrassed me to try it. Body heat. Direct contact. I sat down on the floor of the nursery, right there among the warning lights and the failing systems, and I pulled all 4 hatchlings into my lap, holding them close against my chest, sharing whatever warmth my own body had to give. "You're okay," I said, over and over, my voice low and steady, even though my heart was hammering. "You're okay. I've got you. I've got all of you." I do not know if they understood the words. I do not think that mattered. What mattered was the sound, the steady rhythm of a voice that was not panicking, a heartbeat they could press themselves against, warmth that did not flicker and fade like the failing lights above us. Slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, the smallest hatchling's skin began to shift. The dull gray warmed, just slightly, toward gold. I do not know how long I sat there on that floor, long enough for my legs to go numb, long enough for the alarm outside to finally soften from a scream to a low hum, long enough for 4 small creatures, who were never supposed to trust a human, to fall asleep against my chest, one by one, their breathing slow and even. When the main lights flickered back to their normal, gentle glow, and the amber warmth returned to the walls, I finally let myself breathe. I looked down at the 4 small shapes curled against me, safe, breathing, warm. My work jacket was still wrapped around the smallest one, who had burrowed so deep inside it that only the tip of one small clawed hand still showed. I should have felt relief, and I did, but underneath that relief was something else, something I did not have a name for yet. A kind of quiet pride, a kind of connection I had no right to feel, and could not make myself let go of. I did not know, sitting there on that floor with 4 sleeping alien children in my arms, that the hardest part of that day had not even started yet. I did not know that the Queen herself was already on her way home, 3 full days earlier than anyone expected, her ship cutting through open space at a speed that would bring her back to this exact nursery within the hour. All I knew, in that moment, was that 4 small lives had needed someone, and I had been the only one there. So I stayed. I did not call for a replacement. I did not slip quietly out the door and let someone else take credit, or blame, for what had happened. I sat on that floor, my legs numb, my jacket wrapped around a sleeping hatchling, and I waited for whatever came next. Outside the nursery door, the corridor lights steadied to their usual soft blue. The alarm had stopped completely now, replaced by an eerie, heavy silence, the kind that follows a crisis just barely survived. I did not know yet how close that crisis had come to becoming a tragedy. I did not know that somewhere above the station, powerful Caliph officials were already asking hard questions about how the nursery systems had failed so suddenly, and why the trained attendant assigned to this shift was nowhere to be found. All I knew was the weight of 4 small bodies against my chest, the soft rise and fall of their breathing, and the strange, quiet certainty that I had done the right thing, no matter what happened next. I brushed a strand of hair back from my face with one careful hand, trying not to disturb the little one sleeping against my shoulder, and I looked toward the door. Somewhere out there, I would have to explain this. Somewhere out there, someone far more powerful than me would want to know exactly what a human janitor had been doing alone in the royal nursery. But for now, in this quiet moment before everything changed, I let myself simply hold on. 4 small lives, safe, for now, because of me. I had no idea that the Queen's ship had already entered the station's outer docking ring. I had no idea that in less than an hour, the door behind me would open, and the most powerful being on Halcyon Station would walk in to find a human sitting on her nursery floor, wrapped in silence, holding her children like they were the most precious thing in the universe. Because to me, in that moment, they were. The warning lights along the ceiling gave one last soft pulse, before settling into their normal steady glow. I stayed exactly where I was, afraid that if I moved even an inch, I might wake the 4 small shapes curled so peacefully against me. Somewhere far above, a massive ship began its final approach toward the station, carrying a mother who did not yet know how close she had come to losing everything. And I sat there in the quiet, holding her children, waiting for a future I could not yet imagine. The door hissed open 40 minutes later, and it was not the queen. It was Sela, the nursery attendant, rushing in with wide eyes and shaking hands, her uniform half-fastened like she had dressed while running. She stopped dead when she saw me sitting on the floor, 4 sleeping hatchlings tucked against my chest, my old work jacket still wrapped around the smallest one. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. "You," Sela finally managed, her voice thin. "You are the maintenance worker." "From deck 3. "Daniel," I said quietly, not wanting to startle the little ones awake. "My name is Daniel." Sela stepped closer, her eyes moving quickly over each hatchling, checking their breathing, their color, the steady rise and fall of their small chests. Something in her posture eased, just slightly, like a held breath finally released. "They are stable," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "How did you—" She stopped, shook her head, and knelt beside me instead of finishing the question. The cooling system failed. A power surge hit 3 sectors at once. I was in the medical wing when it happened. I could not get back in time. "I heard them crying," I said. "I didn't think. I just came in." Sela looked at me for a long moment, her gold eyes searching my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle that did not make sense to her. "You are not trained for this. You do not know our biology. You could have done real harm without meaning to." "I didn't know what else to do," I admitted. "I just tried to keep them warm, that's all. I used the blankets, and then I just held them." She reached out, hesitant, and touched the fabric of my jacket wrapped around the smallest hatchling. Her fingers lingered there for a moment before she pulled back. "This one," she said softly, "is the weakest of the 4. She was born last and smallest. We worried, when they hatched, that she might not survive her first season." Sela looked up at me, and something in her expression had shifted from suspicion to something closer to wonder. "She is warm. Her color is good. Her breathing is calm." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing at all. I simply held on, careful not to jostle the small shapes still sleeping against me. Sela stood, moved to the control panel on the wall, and began working quickly, her long fingers moving over symbols I could not read. The amber lights along the walls brightened, steadying into their proper rhythm. A soft mechanical hum filled the room, comforting in a way I had not expected a machine sound to be. "The system is stable now," she said. "I can take them from here." I hesitated. It was strange how hard it was to let go, how my arms had already learned the exact weight and shape of 4 small lives in less than an hour. But I nodded, and slowly, carefully, I began to shift the smallest hatchling from my jacket into Sela's waiting arms. The moment the small one left the warmth of my chest, her eyes fluttered open, pale gold, barely more than slits, blinking up first at Sela, then turning, searching, until they found me. She made a small sound, somewhere between a chirp and a cry, and reached one clawed hand toward me. Sela froze. "That is not normal," she said quietly. "Newly bonded hatchlings do not reach for strangers. They reach only for their mother or for their designated caretaker." "I'm not either of those things," I said, feeling suddenly unsure, like I had crossed some invisible line without meaning to. "No," Sela agreed slowly, "you are not." The other 3 hatchlings began to stir then, one by one, drawn awake by their sister's small cry. And one by one, their sleepy gold eyes found me too, and one by one, 4 small clawed hands reached out in the same direction, toward me. Sela stood very still, holding the smallest one, watching this happen with an expression I could not read. I did not know if it was concern or curiosity or something closer to fear. "I need to report this," she finally said. "The temperature failure, the missing attendant record, what happened here today, all of it. Am I in trouble?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded when I said it. Sela did not answer right away. She looked down at the hatchling in her arms, then back at me, then toward the door, as if she could already sense something approaching that neither of us could stop. "The Queen's ship registered an early return 3 hours ago," she said quietly. "She was due back in 2 days. She is not due back in 2 days anymore. She will be here within the hour." My stomach dropped. "She's coming back early," I repeated. "Something alarmed her enough to cut her diplomatic visit short," Sela said. "I do not know what, but when she arrives, and she learns her hatchlings nearly died in a system failure, while under the care of a trained attendant, who was not present." Sela paused, glancing at the 4 small faces still watching me with quiet, trusting eyes, and that instead they were cared for by a human janitor who should not have even been allowed through that door. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. I felt my heartbeat pick up, fast and uneven, and I forced myself to breathe slowly, the same way I had tried to calm the hatchlings less than an hour before. Funny how quickly the roles had reversed. "What should I do?" I asked. Sela considered this for a long moment, cradling the smallest hatchling against her shoulder, the little one already drifting back toward sleep, her small hand still curled loosely in the direction of my sleeve. "Stay," Sela said finally. "If you leave now, it will look like you are hiding something, and if the Queen learns the truth from someone other than the person who lived it, she may not believe the truth at all." I looked down at the 3 hatchlings still gathered close around me, their small bodies warm now, their breathing steady and calm. Whatever came next, whatever the Queen thought when she walked through that door and found a human sitting in her nursery, I could not make myself regret what I had done. "Okay," I said, "I'll stay." Sela nodded once, then moved to gently place the smallest hatchling back into the woven nest at the center of the room. The other 3, reluctant, finally allowed themselves to be settled beside her, though even as Sela tucked the blankets around them, their small eyes kept drifting back toward me, watching, as if making sure I had not disappeared. The next 20 minutes passed in a strange, heavy quiet. Sela worked at the control panel, restoring systems, checking readings, occasionally glancing my way with an expression I still could not fully place. I sat nearby, close enough that the hatchlings could see me, unwilling to leave their side even now that the danger had passed. I thought about my life before this moment. 6 months on this station, mopping floors, hauling waste bins, fixing leaking pipes in the maintenance tunnels far below the levels where anyone important ever walked. I had taken this job because the pay was good and the questions were few. I had never imagined that a single afternoon could turn everything upside down. I thought about my little sister, born too small, too early, and how my mother had held her against her chest for the first 3 days of her life, refusing to let the hospital staff take her, insisting that warmth and closeness were medicine too. I had been young then, barely old enough to understand what was happening, but I remembered the fear in the room, and I remembered how, slowly, my sister's cries had grown stronger, her color had improved, and eventually she had come home. Maybe that was where the instinct had come from. Maybe some part of me had simply reached back to that memory without meaning to, and done for 4 alien hatchlings what my mother had once done for a human infant fighting to survive. Whatever the reason, it had worked, and now I had to face whatever came from it. Sela finished her work at the panel and turned to face me fully for the first time since Sela had said the words "her ship." Her expression had softened, just slightly, though tension still sat heavy in her shoulders. "I have filed my initial report," she said. "It states clearly that the system failure was not your fault, and that your actions likely saved the smallest hatchling's life. I have recommended commendation, not punishment." Relief flooded through me, quick and sharp. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Sela said, and there was something careful in her voice, something that told me she knew more than she was saying. A report is words on a screen. The Queen will want to see with her own eyes. She will want to understand, fully, what happened to her children while she was away. And she will want to know why a human was the one who saved them when a trained member of her own staff was not. I swallowed hard. "You mean she might not believe it was an accident, that I wasn't supposed to be here?" I mean, Sela said quietly, that the Queen trusts almost no one completely. Not humans, not even most of her own kind. She has reasons for that trust, reasons that go back further than either of us. When she arrives and finds her most vulnerable children calm, healthy, and reaching for a stranger's hand instead of crying for their mother, she will have many questions. Some of them may not be kind. I looked down at the 4 small shapes now sleeping peacefully in their nest, safe and warm because of choices made in a handful of desperate minutes. Whatever came next, whatever judgment waited on the other side of that door, I found I could not bring myself to be afraid of the consequences in the way Sela seemed to expect. I had done what needed to be done. If that was a crime here, then I would face it honestly. I'm not going anywhere, I said again, quieter this time, more to myself than to her. Sela studied me for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind her gold eyes. Then, almost gently, she said, "No, I do not believe you are." Outside the nursery, somewhere far above the station's outer hull, a massive ship had already begun its final descent toward the docking ring. Inside its command chamber, a mother who had felt an inexplicable urgent pull toward home 3 days early was preparing herself for whatever waited on the other side of her return. Neither of us in that quiet nursery knew exactly what that pull had been, or why it had struck the Queen so suddenly during a routine diplomatic visit. But something in the universe, some thread none of us could name, had already begun weaving these events together. The door would open soon, and when it did, nothing about my life on this station would ever be the same again. The docking clamps locked with a heavy metallic sound that echoed through the entire upper ring of the station, and I felt it even 3 decks down, a low tremor moving through the floor beneath me, like the station itself was holding its breath. Sela stiffened at the sound. She is here. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting so long on the hard floor, and moved to stand a respectful distance from the nest where the 4 hatchlings still slept. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe, to remember that I had done nothing wrong. Minutes passed. I heard voices in the corridor outside, sharp and urgent, Caliph words spoken too fast for me to follow. Then footsteps, quick and heavy, moving directly toward the nursery door. The door opened. I had seen the Queen before, from a distance, through reinforced glass, a tall shape moving gracefully down corridors humans were not permitted to enter. I had never stood this close to her. I had never felt the sheer presence of her fill a room the way it did the moment she stepped through that door. She was taller than Sela, taller than any Caliph I had seen, with deep violet markings along her arms and shoulders that seemed to shimmer faintly under the amber light. Her eyes, a brighter gold than any of her children's, swept the room in a single sharp motion, taking in everything at once. The failed control panel, now steady, the scattered blankets, Sela standing near the nest, and me, her gaze locked onto me, and for one terrible silent moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath along with me. "Explain," the Queen said. Her voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something coiled tight and ready to strike. Now. Sela stepped forward quickly, her posture dropping into something formal and deferential, her head bowed slightly. "My Queen, there was a power surge in this sector approximately 1 hour ago. The nursery's environmental controls failed. I was called away to the medical wing on an unrelated emergency and could not return in time." "Then who," the Queen said, each word sharp as a blade, "has been in this room with my children?" Every eye in the chamber turned to me. I straightened my shoulders, forced my voice to stay steady, even though every instinct in my body wanted to look away from those burning gold eyes. "My name is Daniel Wren. I'm a maintenance worker on this station. I was cleaning the corridor outside when I heard your children crying. The alarm was going off, nobody else was here, so I came in." The Queen crossed the room in 3 long strides, moving past me as though I were nothing more than furniture, and knelt beside the nest where her 4 children still slept, undisturbed even by her arrival. Her hands, long-fingered and precise, moved gently over each small body in turn, checking, examining, searching for any sign of harm. I watched her expression change as she worked. The tight fury in her jaw eased, replaced first by confusion, then by something that looked almost like disbelief. "Their color is good," she murmured, almost to herself. "Their breathing is steady. This one," her hand paused over the smallest hatchling, the one who had been coldest, weakest, closest to danger. "This one should have been in crisis. The environmental logs show the temperature in this room dropped to dangerous levels for nearly 20 minutes. She almost died," I said quietly. "I did what I could." The Queen's head turned toward me sharply. "What you could, a human, with no training in Calith physiology, no understanding of what our hatchlings need to survive extreme cold." Her voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "Explain to me how a maintenance worker succeeded where trained systems failed." I felt my hand shaking slightly, but I kept my voice level. "I didn't have any special training. I just knew they needed to be warm, and they needed to not be alone. So I wrapped them in blankets, and I held them against me, and I talked to them so they'd know someone was there. That's all I did." The Queen stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and then she looked down again at her sleeping children, at the small hand of the smallest hatchling still curled loosely in the fabric of a blanket that smelled, faintly, of human sweat and cleaning solution rather than the usual scented oils used in the royal nursery. "You held them," she repeated slowly, as if testing the words for truth, "against your body. For how long?" "Almost an hour," I said. "Maybe longer. I lost track of time." Something shifted in the Queen's face then, something I could not quite name. She reached down and gently lifted the smallest hatchling from the nest, cradling her carefully against her chest. The little one stirred, her pale gold eyes blinking open slowly, and for a moment she simply looked up at her mother. Then her small clawed hand reached past the Queen's shoulder, stretching toward me. The Queen went very still. "She reaches for you," the Queen said, and her voice had gone quiet now, stripped of its earlier fury. "Not for me, for you." "I don't think it means anything bad," I said carefully. "Sela said something about newly bonded hatchlings only reaching for their caretaker. Maybe it's just because I was the one who kept her warm." "You do not understand what you are saying," the Queen said, and there was something almost sharp in her tone again, though it no longer felt aimed at me like a weapon. It felt more like fear. "A bond formed in a hatchling's earliest hours can last a lifetime. It cannot be undone easily. If my daughter has bonded to you in this crisis, it will affect her for years to come." My stomach twisted. I didn't know that. I swear, I didn't know. I was just trying to keep them alive. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, looking down at the small hatchling in her arms, who had settled again, her hand still resting toward me, even in her half-sleep. Then she turned toward Sela. "Full report," she said. "Every detail. The power surge, the failure timeline, your absence, and this human's actions. I want to know exactly what happened in my nursery while I was away." Sela began to speak, quickly and precisely, laying out the sequence of events. The unexpected power surge that had struck 3 sectors simultaneously. The emergency call that had pulled her to the medical wing moments before the nursery systems failed. The full 20 minutes during which the royal quadruplets had been left completely unsupervised, their environmental systems failing, their lives genuinely at risk. As Sela spoke, the Queen's expression grew darker, though I could tell now that the anger was no longer directed at me. It was aimed somewhere else entirely, somewhere far beyond this room. "A surge across 3 sectors simultaneously," the Queen repeated when Sela finished. "That is not a coincidence. That is not simple mechanical failure. I do not know the cause yet, my Queen," Sela admitted. "Engineering has not completed their investigation." "Have them prioritize it," the Queen said sharply. "I want answers within the hour." She turned back to me then, and I braced myself, unsure what to expect. Her gold eyes studied my face for a long moment, searching for something I could not guess at. "You risked yourself for my children," she said slowly. "Children of a species not your own. Children who could have injured you without meaning to, in their distress. Why?" I thought about the question carefully before I answered, because I sensed, somehow, that my answer mattered more than I understood. "Because they were scared and cold and alone," I said, "and I couldn't just walk away and pretend I hadn't heard them. Where I come from, when something small and helpless needs you, you don't wait to see if it's your job to help. You just help." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Behind her, Selah shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how this exchange would end. "You are not what I expected," the Queen finally said. "I have dealt with many humans since your species began working on this station. Most keep their heads down. Most avoid any contact with my kind beyond what their duties require. You did the opposite. You walked directly into danger for creatures that owed you nothing and that you owed nothing to in return." "I couldn't leave them," I said simply. "That's all it was." The Queen looked down again at the hatchling in her arms, then at the other three still sleeping peacefully in their nest, safe and warm, their small chests rising and falling in steady, healthy rhythm. Whatever storm had been building inside her since she walked through that door seemed, slowly, to be settling. "My name is Ivrena," she said, and something in the way she said it felt like an offering, though I did not yet understand its full weight. "I am the sovereign of this station, and of my people's presence within this sector, and you have done something today that very few beings, of any species, have ever done for me or for my children." "I just did what anyone would do," I said, though even as I said it, I suspected that was not entirely true. "Not on this station, not with the risks involved." "No," Ivrena said, "you did what almost no one would do. You saw danger, and instead of protecting yourself, you protected the helpless. That is rarer than you understand, Daniel Wren." Hearing her say my name, correctly, carefully, felt strange after an afternoon of being nameless, invisible, just another human worker keeping the station clean. I did not know what to say, so I said nothing and simply waited. Ivrena turned to Selah. "The power surge investigation is priority. I want a full accounting of who had access to the nursery systems in the hours before this incident. If this was sabotage, I will find who is responsible, and there will be consequences." "Yes, my queen," Selah said, bowing slightly before hurrying from the room to relay the order. That left the two of us, alone, standing over 4 sleeping hatchlings in a room that had nearly become a place of tragedy instead of safety. Ivrena looked at me for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, she extended the smallest hatchling toward me. "She will not settle fully until she has felt your warmth again," Ivrena said. "It seems the bond formed today runs deeper than a single incident. Will you hold her so she may rest properly?" I hesitated, unsure if this was truly permission or some kind of test, but the small hatchling was already reaching for me, her tiny hand opening and closing in the air, and I could not bring myself to refuse her. I stepped forward and took her carefully into my arms, the same way I had less than 2 hours before, and immediately, her small body relaxed, her breathing evening out into the same peaceful rhythm as her siblings. Ivrena watched this with an expression I still could not fully read, somewhere between wonder and quiet unease. "This changes things," she said softly, almost to herself. "This changes many things." I did not know, in that moment, exactly what she meant. I did not know that somewhere in the station's engineering deck, a technician was already discovering evidence that the power surge had not been an accident at all. I did not know that a rival within Ivrena's own court had been watching this nursery for weeks, waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity to strike at her most vulnerable point. I only knew the warm, steady weight of a small alien life resting against my chest, trusting me completely, and a queen standing before me whose entire understanding of humans, and perhaps of trust itself, had just been quietly, permanently altered. "Thank you," Ivrena said finally, the words simple but heavy with meaning. "For my children's lives. I will not forget this, Daniel Wren." I looked down at the small hatchling sleeping peacefully in my arms, then back up at the Queen, and I understood, somehow, that whatever came next in my life on this station, it would not be the same quiet, invisible existence I had known before today. "I'm glad I was here," I said honestly. "I'm glad they're safe." Ivrena studied me for one more long moment, then nodded slowly, as if reaching some private decision. "Come," she said, "there is much still to discuss. And I suspect, Daniel Wren, that your part in this story is only just beginning." The private chamber Ivrena led me to was nothing like the maintenance corridors I usually worked in. The walls shimmered with soft, shifting light, and the air smelled faintly of something sweet, like flowers I could not name. I sat across from her at a low table, still faintly aware of the warmth of the hatchling who had finally been returned to her nest, sleeping soundly now under Sella's careful watch. Ivrena did not sit immediately. She stood near the window, looking out at the stars beyond the station's hull, her arms folded, her expression distant. "3 days ago," she said, "I was in the middle of a delicate negotiation on a station 2 systems away. Important work, work that could shape trade agreements for the next decade." She paused, and then, without warning, I felt a pull to come home. Not a message, not a warning from my staff, just a feeling, sudden and undeniable, that something was wrong with my children. I stayed quiet, unsure if she wanted a response. I dismissed it, at first. She continued. "I told myself it was simple worry, the kind any parent feels when far from their young. But the feeling did not fade. It grew stronger. By the second day, I could not focus on the negotiations at all. I ended them early, against the advice of my own counsel, and returned home." She turned to face me. "Now I understand why. You think you sensed something was wrong," I said slowly, "before it happened." "I do not believe in coincidence," Ivrena said. "Not when it comes to my children. I believe someone wanted me away from this station during a very specific window of time. And I believe that same someone caused the failure that nearly cost me one of my daughters." A soft chime interrupted her, and a moment later, Selah entered the chamber, her expression tight with urgency. "My Queen," she said, "engineering has completed their initial investigation. The power surge was not accidental. It was triggered remotely, through an access code belonging to a member of your court." Ivrena's entire posture went rigid. "Which member?" Selah hesitated, glancing briefly at me before answering. "Counselor Drennick." The name meant nothing to me, but the effect it had on Ivrena was immediate and severe. Her jaw tightened, her eyes darkened, and for a moment, the warmth she had shown toward me and her children seemed to vanish entirely, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Drennick has opposed my rule since I first ascended," she said quietly. "He has argued for years that my line is too soft, too willing to work alongside outside species, too willing to bend old traditions. He has wanted my position for himself for a long time." "You think he tried to hurt your children to get to you?" I said, the realization settling heavily in my chest. "I think," Ivrena said, "that he calculated the political cost of harming me directly was too high. But harming my children, weakening my line, creating doubt about my fitness to lead while appearing to have no direct hand in the tragedy himself, that would serve his purposes just as well, with far less risk to him." Selah shifted uncomfortably. "My Queen, if this becomes public, there will be no way to prove intent without further investigation. Drennick will claim the access code was stolen or misused by another." "Then we will investigate further," Ivrena said sharply. "And in the meantime, I want additional security placed on the nursery immediately. No single point of failure, no unsupervised windows of vulnerability, ever again." "Yes, my Queen." Ivrena turned back to me then, her expression softening slightly, though the tension in her shoulders remained. "You understand now what almost happened here today. This was not simple misfortune. This was an attack, aimed at the most vulnerable members of my family, timed for a moment when I would be too far away to help them. And I happened to be the one person close enough, and stubborn enough not to just walk away, I said quietly. Yes, Ivrena said, and because of that, my children are alive, all 4 of them. If you had not entered that room, if you had followed the instincts of every other worker on this station and stayed away from a place you were not permitted to enter, my smallest daughter would very likely be dead right now. The weight of that statement settled heavily over the room. I thought about how close it had been, how the little one's skin had faded to that dull gray, how her breathing had slowed in a way that had terrified me even without fully understanding the danger. What happens now? I asked. To Drennick and to me. Ivrena considered the question carefully. Drennick will be investigated formally, quietly, at first, until we have proof strong enough to act on without risking further instability in my court. He is dangerous, and he will not simply confess to what he has done. And me? You, Ivrena said, have earned something today that very few outside my own kind have ever earned. My trust and my gratitude. Both of those carry weight on this station, whether you wanted them or not. Sayla spoke up gently. My queen, there is also the matter of the bond. The hatchlings, particularly the youngest, have shown clear signs of attachment to Daniel Wren. That is not something that can simply be dismissed or reversed. Ivrena nodded slowly. No, it cannot. And I do not believe I wish to reverse it, even if such a thing were possible. She looked at me directly. My daughter's life was saved, not by protocol or training, or the careful systems my people have built over generations. It was saved by simple, direct kindness, offered by someone who owed her nothing at all. I find I cannot easily dismiss the value of that. I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief settle over me. Only hours ago, I had been an invisible janitor, mopping floors that important people walked past without a glance. Now I was sitting across from the most powerful being on the station, being told that my simple, desperate choice to help had changed something fundamental in how she saw not just me, but perhaps humans as a whole. I don't know what to say, I admitted honestly. You do not need to say anything, Ivrena replied. You have already said everything that matters, through your actions rather than your words. She paused, studying me for a long moment. I would like you to remain close to the nursery in the coming weeks, while security is strengthened and the investigation into Drennick continues. My daughter's attachment to you may prove useful in helping her feel safe during a difficult time, and frankly, I find myself trusting few others as completely as I find myself trusting you, despite having known you for less than a single day. You want me working in the nursery, I said, still trying to process the sudden shift in my entire existence on this station. I want you nearby, Ivrena clarified, in whatever capacity makes sense. Your official duties can remain unchanged if you prefer, but I would ask that you visit regularly, so my children may continue to feel the security they found in you today. I thought about my small quarters 3 decks down, my simple routine of mopping floors and hauling waste, the quiet, unnoticed life I had built for myself on this station over the past 6 months. All of it felt impossibly small now, compared to what had just happened, compared to the trust being offered to me by a being who, hours ago, had looked ready to consider me a threat. I'd like that, I said finally. I'd like to make sure they're okay. All of them. Ivrena's expression eased into something that might have been the beginning of a genuine smile, though Caliph expressions were still difficult for me to fully read. Then it is settled. Sayla will arrange the necessary permissions for you to move through the upper levels freely, and to enter the nursery whenever you wish. Sayla nodded, already making notes on a small device at her wrist. I will have it arranged within the hour, my queen. As the arrangements were being finalized, I found myself thinking about Drennick, about the danger that still lurked somewhere within this station's power structure, hidden behind political maneuvering and careful denial. Whatever had almost happened today was not truly over. A man capable of endangering 4 innocent hatchlings to further his own ambitions was not likely to simply give up after one failed attempt. What if he tries again? I asked quietly. Drennick, I mean. If he already tried to hurt them once. Ivrena's expression darkened once more, the warmth from moments before replaced by something colder, sharper, more calculating. Then he will find that this station and this family are far better protected than he anticipated. And he will learn, eventually, that some mistakes cannot be undone quietly. There was a promise in those words, a warning aimed at someone far from this room, and I found myself believing, without doubt, that Ivrena intended to keep it. For now, she continued, her tone shifting back to something calmer, my children are safe, and that is what matters most. The investigation will continue in the background. You need not concern yourself with the politics of my court, Daniel Wren. Your part in today's events was simple and pure, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible. I nodded, though something in the back of my mind whispered that simple and pure rarely stayed that way for long, not on a station where power and ambition moved in currents far deeper than anything visible on the surface. Sayla finished her notes and looked up. My queen, the hatchlings are stirring again. The youngest is asking for warmth. Ivrena glanced toward me, something almost like amusement flickering behind her gold eyes. It seems your presence is required once more, Daniel Wren. I stood, feeling the strange, sudden weight of a new role settling onto my shoulders, one I had never asked for, and one I still barely understood. Lead the way, I said. As we walked back toward the nursery together, Queen and Janitor, side by side in a way that would have seemed impossible only hours before, I could not shake the feeling that this was only the very beginning of something much larger than either of us had expected. Somewhere in the depths of the station, a dangerous man was already recalculating his next move, unaware that the human he had unknowingly nearly destroyed today had just become one of the most closely protected individuals on Halcyon Station. And somewhere ahead of us, in a warm nursery lit by soft amber light, 4 small hatchlings waited, already reaching for the one person who had proven, without hesitation, that their lives were worth fighting for. 3 weeks passed, and life on Halcyon Station transformed into something I barely recognized. Every morning, before my official shift began, I walked the long corridor toward the royal nursery, past guards who once would have stopped me without a second thought, and now simply nodded as I passed. Every morning, 4 small faces turned toward the door the moment it opened, gold eyes bright with recognition, small clawed hands reaching for me before I had even fully stepped inside. I learned their names properly during those weeks. Vessa, the smallest, the one who had come closest to danger that first terrible day, quick to laugh and quicker to cry when I left even for a moment. Corin, the boldest of the 4, always trying to climb higher than his siblings, always testing the edges of what he was allowed to do. Thessa, quiet and watchful, the one who studied everything around her with careful, patient eyes. And Aldrich, gentle and slow to startle, content simply to sit beside me while I worked, his small hand resting against my arm. I still cleaned floors most days. That part of my life had not disappeared entirely, and honestly, I did not want it to. There was something steady and honest about the work that I did not want to lose, even as everything else around me shifted into something unrecognizable. But everything was not calm, not truly. Sayla had warned me, more than once, that Drennick would not simply accept defeat after his first attempt failed, and on the 22nd day since the power surge, I learned exactly how right she had been. It began with a message, delivered quietly to my quarters late in the evening by a young Caliph messenger who would not meet my eyes. The Queen requests your presence immediately, nursery wing. Come alone, come quickly. Something about the message felt wrong, too rushed, too sparse, compared to the careful, formal messages I had grown used to receiving from Ivrena's staff over the past 3 weeks. But the mention of the nursery, the mention of urgency, was enough to send me running through the corridors without a second thought. I reached the nursery wing to find the corridor unusually empty, no guards at their posts, no soft murmur of conversation from nearby chambers. Just silence, heavy and wrong, pressing down on me as I approached the nursery door. The door was slightly open. I pushed it the rest of the way, and my heart stopped. Sayla lay near the control panel, unmoving, a dark mark along her temple where something had struck her. The 4 hatchlings were gathered together in the center of the room, huddled close, frightened but unharmed, their small bodies shaking as they clung to each other. And standing near them, tall and cold-eyed, was a Caliph I had never met but recognized instantly from Ivrena's description. "Drennick. You," he said, his voice low and sharp, his gold eyes narrowing as he studied me. "The human who ruined my carefully planned accident. I confess, I did not expect the Queen's gratitude toward you to run quite this deep. It has made my task considerably more difficult." "What did you do to Sela?" I demanded, my eyes flicking toward her still form. "She will live," Drennick said dismissively. "Unlike the plan she nearly stumbled onto, discovering the truth about the power surge far sooner than I anticipated. I have been forced to move more quickly than I intended." I glanced toward the 4 hatchlings, frightened but alive, and felt a cold, steady anger settle over the fear building in my chest. "What do you want?" "I want what should have happened weeks ago," Drennick said. Ivrena's line, weakened, doubted, questioned by her own court. If her children disappear, if their fate becomes uncertain, her position becomes untenable. The Council will demand new leadership, leadership I am well positioned to provide. "You're going to hurt them," I said, my voice shaking despite my attempt to stay calm. "I am going to remove them," Drennick corrected, as though the distinction mattered to him. "Quietly, and far from this station, where they will remain safely hidden until my position is secured. Afterward, their return can be negotiated, framed as a rescue. I will be seen as a hero, not a villain." "That's insane," I said. "You'd terrify them, traumatize them, all for your own ambition." Drennick's expression did not change. "Ambition is what built this station, human, what built my entire species' place among the stars. Sentiment is a luxury I cannot afford, and one you clearly indulge in far too easily." He took a step toward the hatchlings, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to move, to do something, anything, to stop what was about to happen. I did not think. I acted the same way I had 3 weeks earlier, without calculation, without strategy, simply moving on pure instinct to place myself directly between Drennick and the 4 small lives huddled behind me. "You'll have to go through me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. Drennick studied me with something between amusement and irritation, a human, standing against a member of the ruling council. Admirable, in a foolish sort of way, but ultimately meaningless. "You have no weapon, no training, no authority here." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm not moving." For a tense moment, neither of us spoke. Behind me, I could hear the hatchlings' frightened breathing, could feel Vessa's small hand gripping the fabric of my pants leg, seeking the same safety she had found in me weeks before. Drennick's patience, it seemed, had limits. He raised one hand, some small device glinting between his fingers, clearly intending to incapacitate me the same way he had already dealt with Sayla. Before he could act, the nursery door burst open behind him. Ivrena moved into the room like a storm given physical form, faster than I had ever seen her move, and within seconds she had crossed the distance between the door and Drennick, seizing his wrist before the device in his hand could be used. "Drennick," she said, her voice low and dangerous, colder than I had ever heard it. "I had hoped the evidence against you was wrong. I see now that I was foolish to hope for anything so kind." Drennick's expression shifted from calculation to genuine alarm as he realized his plan had unraveled far faster than intended. "Ivrena, this is not what it—" "Do not," Ivrena said sharply, "insult me further with lies. I have watched the security recordings from this room. I know exactly what you intended for my children." More guards flooded into the room behind her, quickly moving to restrain Drennick, who continued protesting even as they secured him, his earlier calm confidence completely shattered. Ivrena did not waste further attention on him. She turned immediately toward her children, kneeling beside them, checking each small body carefully for injury, her earlier fury replaced entirely by desperate maternal concern. "They are unharmed," I said quickly, still standing protectively nearby. "Frightened, but unharmed. He didn't touch them before I got here." Ivrena looked up at me, her gold eyes bright with an emotion I had never seen from her before, something raw and unguarded. "You stood against him, alone, unarmed." "I couldn't let him take them," I said simply. "Not after everything." Behind Ivrena, medical staff had arrived and were carefully attending to Sela, who was beginning to stir, groaning softly as consciousness returned. The guards secured Drennick fully and began escorting him from the room, his protests growing quieter as the reality of his situation settled in. Ivrena gathered all 4 hatchlings close against her, holding them tightly, and for a long moment, the room was filled with nothing but the sound of her quiet, relieved breathing, and the softer sounds of her children slowly calming in her arms. When she finally looked up at me again, something in her expression had changed permanently. "Twice now," she said quietly, "you have placed yourself between my children and danger, without hesitation, without any obligation to do so. I do not know how to properly measure a debt of this size." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "I just did what needed doing." "That," Ivrena said, "is precisely why I trust you as I trust almost no one else, human or Caliph. You do not act from ambition or calculation or expectation of reward. You act because it is right, simply and completely." She paused, studying me carefully. "That is a rarer quality than you understand, Daniel Wren, and it is one this station and my family desperately need." Over the following days, the full truth of Drennick's scheme came to light. His plan had been more extensive than even Ivrena initially realized, involving multiple co-conspirators within the council who had grown resentful of her leadership and her willingness to work closely alongside other species, including humans. With Drennick's capture, and the evidence gathered from his own devices, the entire network began to unravel, exposing years of quiet political maneuvering aimed at destabilizing Ivrena's rule. The council, faced with undeniable proof of the conspiracy, moved quickly to strip Drennick of his position and authority, and to investigate every individual connected to his scheme. Ivrena's leadership, rather than being weakened as Drennick had hoped, emerged from the crisis stronger than before, her handling of the situation praised even by those who had once doubted her methods. And through it all, I remained close to the nursery, watching 4 small hatchlings slowly heal from their frightening encounter, their trust in me only growing deeper with each passing day. One evening, weeks after Drennick's capture, Ivrena called me to her private chamber once more, though this time the atmosphere felt entirely different from that first tense conversation weeks earlier. "I have made a decision," she said, once I was seated across from her, "one I have considered carefully, and one I believe is long overdue." "What kind of decision?" I asked. "You will no longer serve as a maintenance worker on this station," she said. "Instead, I am formally appointing you as guardian and companion to my children, a position of significant honor and trust within my household. You will have full access to the nursery, full authority to act in their protection, and full recognition, both officially and among my court, of the role you have already been fulfilling in practice." I sat in stunned silence for a long moment, trying to process the magnitude of what she was offering. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like that," I finally managed. "I don't have any formal training in—" "You do not need formal training," Ivrena interrupted gently. "You have already proven, twice now, in circumstances far more difficult than any training could prepare someone for, that you possess exactly what my children need: courage, kindness, an unwavering willingness to protect them, regardless of personal risk. These qualities cannot be taught in a classroom, Daniel Wren. They can only be lived." I thought about my life before that first terrible alarm, mopping quiet corridors, keeping my head down, expecting nothing more from this station than steady work and a paycheck. I thought about how completely everything had changed since the moment I had chosen to push open a door I was never meant to enter. I accept, I said finally. I'd be honored. Ivrena's expression softened into something that, after weeks of learning to read Caliph emotions, I recognized clearly now as genuine warmth. Good, because I do not believe my children would easily forgive either of us if you had said otherwise. As if summoned by the conversation itself, the chamber door opened, and Sela entered, escorting all 4 hatchlings, who broke into excited, uneven steps the moment they saw me, rushing across the room with the particular clumsy enthusiasm of young children eager to reach someone they loved. I knelt down and let them crowd around me, small arms wrapping around my neck, small voices chattering happily in a mix of Caliph words and sounds I was slowly learning to understand. Vesa, still the smallest, still the one who had come closest to danger that very first day, pressed her small face against my shoulder and made the soft, contented sound I had come to recognize as pure happiness. Ivrena watched this scene from across the room, her arms folded, her expression unreadable in the way that had once intimidated me and now simply felt familiar, comfortable, like watching a friend think deeply about something important. I once believed, she said quietly, that trust between our species could only ever be cautious, limited, carefully measured. You have shown me, Daniel Wren, that trust freely given, without calculation, can accomplish what careful diplomacy sometimes cannot. I looked up at her, 4 small alien children gathered happily around me, and thought about how strange, and how right, this new life felt. I just wanted to help, I said. That's all it ever was. Yes, Ivrena said softly, and that, in the end, is exactly why it mattered so much. Outside the chamber window, the stars stretched endlessly across the black expanse of space, steady and unchanging, witnesses to a bond that had formed not through careful planning or ancient protocol, but through one simple, human choice, to help when help was needed most. I had come to Halcyon Station as an invisible janitor, someone to be overlooked, unnoticed, easily forgotten. I was leaving that identity behind now, not because I had sought power or position or recognition, but because 4 small lives had needed someone to care for them in their most desperate moment, and I had simply, without hesitation, chosen to be that someone. And as Vesa's small hand tightened trustingly around my finger, and as her 3 siblings settled contentedly around us, I understood, finally and completely, that some of the most important choices in life are made not through grand ambition, but through the simple, quiet decision to show up when it matters most. That choice, made in a moment of crisis I never expected, had changed everything, and I would not have traded it for anything in the universe.